The night my brother announced his engagement, I didn't lose my girlfriend. I lost my identity. Everyone in the ballroom was smiling, my parents, our investors, even my uncle. Like they had been waiting for this moment. Bennett stood under the chandelier, hand on Maya's waist, smiling like a man who earned something. But I knew that smile. It wasn't joy. It was victory. Maya wore the silver dress I helped her choose. She didn't look guilty. She looked certain. That's when my phone started vibrating. Bank alerts. Loan approvals. Credit warnings. All under my name. Across the room, Bennett raised his glass. To loyalty, he said. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't betrayal. It was orchestration. And I wasn't the victim. I was the asset. I didn't react when Bennett said her name. I think that's what shocked him the most. Maya and I are getting married, he said confidently, wrapping his arm around her waist. There was a small pause in the room. Not surprise. Recognition. My mother clapped first. Then my father. Then everyone else followed like it was rehearsed. Maya didn't look at me at first. She kept her eyes on Bennett. On the ring. On the applause. Then finally, she glanced over. Not guilty. Just, resolved. As if this had already been decided long ago. Since when? I asked quietly. Bennett laughed like I'd told a joke. It just happened fast, little brother. Little brother. He hadn't called me that in years. Maya stepped closer to him. Nolan, she said softly, we were growing apart. We were living together. We were planning a vacation. We had just talked about renewing our lease. Growing apart. My phone buzzed again. I stepped away from the crowd and checked it. 3 credit alerts. 2 loan confirmations. 1 overdraft warning. All under my name. I walked back into the hall slowly. Bennett was shaking hands with investors. Investors I had introduced him to. My father pulled me aside. You need to handle this maturely, he whispered. Don't embarrass yourself. Embarrass myself. My girlfriend was engaged to my brother and I was the risk to the family reputation. I looked back at Bennett. He was smiling. Not nervous. Not surprised. Prepared. That's when I knew. This wasn't emotional. It was strategic. The fraud didn't start that night. That was just the reveal. It started months earlier. Small things. A client once thanked Bennett for an idea I pitched. A contract I drafted showed up with his name on it. A bank rep called asking me to confirm an application I had never submitted. At the time, I assumed it was clerical error. Or miscommunication. Or coincidence. It wasn't. The morning after the engagement, I went through everything. Every bank statement. Every signature. Every transaction. Someone had been using my credentials to open lines of credit tied to family development projects. The funds weren't disappearing. They were moving. Into accounts connected to shell LLCs. Owned by Bennett. My hands were steady while I traced it. That surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is loud. This felt cold. Calculated. I called the bank. I need verification on these authorizations, I said calmly. The rep hesitated. Mr. Nolan, these have your digital signature. No, I replied. They don't. Silence. Then. We'll escalate this. Good. That was the first crack. Later that afternoon, I drove to the office. No announcement. No confrontation. Just observation. Bennett was in my father's office, door closed. Maya was in the lobby speaking to one of our investors, smiling like she belonged there. When she saw me, her smile faltered for half a second. Then it came back. Polished. Professional. "Are you okay?" she asked. It wasn't concern. It was assessment. "I'm fine," I said. And for the first time since that ballroom, I meant it. Because now I understood something important. They weren't emotional. They were coordinated. And if I was going to survive this, I couldn't be dramatic. I had to be patient. I didn't confront Bennett. Not yet. Confrontation is what emotional people do. I needed proof. That night, I requested a full credit report. When it arrived, I didn't skim it. I studied it. 4 new business accounts. 2 personal loans. 1 property development line of credit. All opened within the last 6 months. All digitally signed. The IP logs attached to one of the authorizations caught my attention. Not my apartment. Not my phone. The company office. Specifically, the executive floor. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. Sloppy. Not careless. Confident. There's a difference. The next morning, I visited IT. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't raise my voice. "I think my login was compromised," I told them. "Can we check access logs?" They pulled up internal records. Multiple after-hours logins under my credentials. Late nights. Weekends. Times I was out of town. And 1 login timestamped during a weekend retreat. The retreat Bennett insisted I skip because the firm needed stability. I asked casually, who was in the building that weekend? The technician checked security access. 1 executive badge scanned in both days. Bennett's. There it was. Not suspicion. Not instinct. Evidence. But I still needed more. Fraud isn't just about who logged in. It's about who benefited. So I followed the money. The shell companies weren't random. They were tied to one of our largest upcoming development projects, a waterfront property our father had hesitated to approve. The loans under my name were used as bridge funding. If the project succeeded, Bennett would look like the savior. If it failed, the debt traced back to me. It was elegant. Risk transferred. Credit absorbed. Blame pre-assigned. That night, I finally understood the full design. He didn't just steal Maya. He positioned himself to inherit the company. And if anything collapsed, I would be the unstable brother who mismanaged funds after a bad breakup. I wasn't the victim. I was the insurance policy. The next move was critical. If I went to my parents now, Bennett would deny everything and spin it as paranoia. If I went public too early, he'd have time to cover his tracks. So instead, I did something he would never expect. I hired a forensic accountant. Privately. Under attorney-client privilege. When I handed over the documents, the accountant flipped through them silently. "How far do you want to take this?" he asked. "As far as it goes," I replied. He nodded once. "Then don't confront him. Let him keep building. The more he moves, the deeper he buries himself." For the first time since the engagement party, I smiled. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Bennett thought he was ahead. But now I was watching every move. And the higher he climbed on stolen credit, the harder the fall would be. The hardest part wasn't gathering evidence. It was pretending nothing was wrong. At Sunday dinner, Bennett passed me the salt like we were still brothers. Maya asked my mother about wedding venues. My father talked about the waterfront project, Bennett's project, like it was already a success. "No risk this time," he said proudly. Bennett structured it smartly. I almost laughed. Smartly. If they only knew whose credit was carrying that smart structure. I kept my expression neutral. How's the bridge financing holding up? I asked casually. Bennett didn't hesitate. Solid. Too fast. He took a sip of wine, avoiding eye contact for just a fraction too long. That was the first time I saw it. Not guilt. Pressure. Good. The forensic accountant called me 2 days later. It's worse than you thought, he said. There were layered transfers, money moved through 3 holding companies before landing in the development account. Clean enough to avoid casual scrutiny. Dirty enough under audit. And the signatures? I asked. Digitally replicated. But not perfectly. Timestamp inconsistencies. Device mismatch. It's provable. Provable. That word mattered. Because suspicion doesn't destroy someone. Proof does. Instead of going to the board immediately, I waited. The waterfront project was weeks away from final lender approval. Bennett was presenting projections personally. He was positioning himself as the future of the company. So I did something simple. I sent an anonymous compliance inquiry to the primary lender. Just a question. Just enough doubt. Within 48 hours, the lender requested verification on the bridge loan authorizations. Bennett called me that evening. His voice was calm, too calm. Did a bank contact you today? Yes, I said. Pause. What did you tell them? The truth. Another pause. Longer this time. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, Nolan. There it was. Not denial. Minimization. I didn't open those accounts, I said evenly. If you did, you should probably start preparing an explanation. Silence. Then a quiet shift in his tone. You don't understand how business works. I almost admired the confidence. You're right, I said. Explain it to me. He didn't. He hung up. The next morning, the lender froze the bridge financing pending review. Not permanently. Just temporarily. But in development, delay is blood in the water. Investors began asking questions. Board members started requesting documentation. My father looked tired for the first time in years. Bennett scheduled an emergency executive meeting. I wasn't invited. That was his mistake. Because when financial irregularities surface, every executive tied to the authorization gets notified. Including the one whose name was forged. By the time I walked into that boardroom, unannounced, the atmosphere had shifted. Papers were spread across the table. Screens displayed transaction chains. And Bennett wasn't smiling. This is a misunderstanding, he was saying as I entered. Every head turned toward me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just placed a folder on the table. Forensic analysis. IP logs. Device mismatches. Signature replication findings. I think we should review everything, I said calmly. No one clapped this time. No one smiled. And for the first time since that engagement party, Bennett looked uncertain. Not defeated. Not yet. But uncertain. And that was enough. Because doubt spreads faster than rumors. And once doubt enters a boardroom, it doesn't leave quietly. Audits don't explode. They suffocate. One request for documentation turns into 5. 5 turn into 20. Then suddenly everyone is checking their own exposure. The board appointed an external firm within a week. Not because of me. Because lenders insisted. That was the moment Bennett stopped being the golden child and started being a liability. The first visible crack came quietly. The waterfront project was temporarily paused. That's corporate language for panic. Investors started calling my father directly instead of Bennett. Vendors demanded written confirmations. One partner pulled out entirely. At the office, conversations stopped when Bennett walked by. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Confidence doesn't disappear overnight, but it does start to twitch. 3 days into the audit, the external firm requested device logs. That's when Bennett came to see me. Not as a brother. As a man cornered. He walked into my office and closed the door slowly. "You think you're smart," he said calmly. I didn't look up from my laptop. "I think I'm careful." His jaw tightened. "You're going to destroy the company over a misunderstanding." I met his eyes. "You used my name." Silence. He exhaled through his nose. Controlled. Measured. It was temporary. The financing had to move fast. "You weren't decisive enough." There it was. Not denial. Justification. "You committed fraud," I said. "I protected the family," he snapped. For the first time, his composure cracked. "You've always been too cautious. Too emotional." I did what needed to be done. I leaned back. "No. You did what benefited you." He stepped closer to my desk. "If this blows up, you don't walk away clean either. Your name is on everything." He thought that was leverage. It wasn't. "That's why I documented it before the audit began," I replied evenly. That's when I saw it. Fear. Small. Controlled. But real. The audit report came in phases. Phase 1 confirmed financial inconsistencies. Phase 2 traced device access. Phase 3 confirmed signature replication. By the time the final summary was presented to the board, it wasn't a question of whether misconduct happened. It was a question of how public it would become. My father didn't look at me during the meeting. He looked at Bennett. Waiting. Hoping. For some explanation that would fix everything. Bennett tried. He talked about aggressive growth. Strategic risk. Competitive timing. No one interrupted him. They just waited. When he finished, the lead auditor spoke calmly. These actions exposed the company to criminal liability. That was the moment it ended. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just, definitively. The board voted to suspend Bennett pending investigation. Unanimous. Even my father. Outside the building, reporters hadn't arrived yet. But they would. Inside, Bennett stood in the hallway, staring at nothing. For the first time in his life, charm didn't work. He looked at me. Not angry. Not confident. Just searching. "You really did this," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You did." Security walked him to the elevator. Not roughly. Not publicly. Just formally. And that was worse. Because humiliation fades. Documentation doesn't. But this wasn't the collapse. Not yet. This was the shift. The golden child was suspended. The project was frozen. The board was divided. The lenders were nervous. And Maya? She hadn't said a word publicly. But she stopped coming to the office. Which told me everything. Because when loyalty disappears quietly, it never comes back loudly. Suspension bought Bennett time. Exposure took it away. The company released a controlled statement first. Internal financial discrepancies under review. Carefully worded. Vague. Contained. But lenders don't stay quiet when their money is involved. Within 48 hours, one of them filed a formal notice of potential fraud. That filing became public record. After that, the silence broke. The first reporter called my father. The second called the board chair. By the third call, Bennett's name was circulating in industry group chats. Fraud. Forgery. Misrepresentation. Nothing proven yet. But reputations don't wait for court dates. The criminal inquiry started quietly. 2 investigators visited the office. They didn't storm in. They asked for documents. Device logs. Authorization trails. Digital certificates. They were calm. Which made it worse. Because calm means confident. And confidence means evidence. Maya showed up at my apartment that night. No ring. No silver dress. Just exhaustion. You didn't have to destroy him, she said the moment I opened the door. I didn't invite her in. He destroyed himself. She shook her head. It wasn't supposed to go this far. That sentence told me everything. So she knew. Maybe not every detail. But enough. You used my accounts, I said quietly. Loans were signed in your name too. Her eyes shifted. It was temporary. Bennett said once the project cleared, everything would normalize. Normalize. Like identity theft was an accounting adjustment. You chose him, I said. She looked at me then, not manipulative, not polished. Just afraid. They're talking about charges. Yes, I replied. She swallowed. If I cooperate. There it was. Self-preservation. Not regret. Not apology. Just survival instinct. You should do whatever protects you, I said evenly. It wasn't anger anymore. It was distance. She left without another word. And I knew she wouldn't stand beside him when it mattered. The real collapse came 2 weeks later. The forensic findings were submitted to regulators. Signature replication confirmed. Device authentication tied to Bennett's credentials. Funds traced through layered entities. It wasn't creative finance anymore. It was criminal exposure. The board held another emergency vote. Termination. Effective immediately. Regulators were notified. Insurance carriers withdrew coverage. Projects stalled indefinitely. Investors publicly distanced themselves. The golden child became a headline. Bennett called me once during that week. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. You think this makes you better than me? No. It made me careful. My parents came over that Sunday. Not for dinner. For answers. My mother cried quietly at the kitchen table. My father didn't sit. How long did you know? He asked. Long enough, I said. He looked smaller than I remembered. He said you were unstable. That you couldn't handle pressure. I nodded once. That was part of the plan. The realization hit him slowly. Not that Bennett committed fraud. But that he had believed it. That was the real fracture. Not financial. Personal. By the end of the month, formal charges were filed. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just legal. Bennett's accounts were frozen. His access revoked. His reputation erased in a matter of weeks. The wedding photos disappeared from social media. Maya's accounts went private. The industry moved on. It always does. The night the charges became official, I slept without checking my phone. No alerts. No overdrafts. No unknown loans. Just silence. Not victory. Not revenge. Balance. Bennett built his life on my name. And when that name was cleared, His foundation disappeared with it. Bennett didn't come to my apartment right away. Pride doesn't collapse that quickly. First, he tried lawyers. Then investors. Then old friends. When those stopped answering, he came to me. It was raining the night he showed up. No tailored suit. No polished confidence. Just a wrinkled jacket and eyes that hadn't slept. I opened the door, but I didn't step aside. For a moment, we just looked at each other. He spoke first. They're talking about prison. No anger. No charm. Just blunt fear. I know, I said. You could stop this. That almost made me smile. Stop what? The regulators. The board. The charges. If you tell them it was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated calmly. His jaw tightened. I was trying to save the company. You were trying to own it. Silence. Rain hitting the pavement behind him. I never meant for it to ruin you, he said. That was the closest he would ever come to an apology. You ruined me publicly, I replied. You used my credit. My name. You told everyone I was unstable. His breathing changed. You were always too slow, he muttered. Too careful. I did what you couldn't. There it was. Not regret. Just resentment. You didn't beat me, I said quietly. You just cheated. That hit him harder than yelling would have. For the first time in his life, there was no audience to impress. No applause. No one choosing him over me. Just two brothers standing in the rain. You're really going to let this happen, he said. I didn't let it happen, I replied. You started it. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. But structurally. Like something inside him had collapsed and nothing was holding him up anymore. Maya left, he added. I didn't react. She's cooperating, he said. That didn't surprise me. Loyalty built on advantage doesn't survive investigation. He waited for sympathy. I gave him truth instead. You built your life on leverage, I said. Now no one owes you anything. His eyes hardened for a second, like he wanted to blame me again. But even he knew that wouldn't work anymore. You always hated me, he said finally. No, I replied. I just finally stopped protecting you. That was the difference. Growing up, I had covered his mistakes. Stayed quiet. Took responsibility when it was easier. This time, I didn't. He looked at the door. Then at me. For a second, I thought he might say something real. Something honest. Instead he said, you win. I shook my head. This isn't winning. It wasn't. Winning is celebration. This felt like correction. He stood there a few seconds longer. Then he turned and walked away. No dramatic ending. No shouting. Just the sound of rain swallowing the last echo of what used to be my brother. I closed the door. And for the first time since that engagement party, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt finished. The company survived. Barely. Not because of me alone, but because damage, when caught early enough, can still be contained. The board restructured leadership. External oversight was installed. Every major financial movement required dual authorization now. Systems replaced trust. That was the real lesson. I didn't step into Bennett's position. That would have looked like ambition. Instead, I rebuilt slowly. Repaired my credit. Closed fraudulent accounts. Filed civil claims to protect my name permanently. It took months. Reputation repairs always do. But something strange happened during that time. People started coming to me. Not because I was the founder's son. Not because I was competing with Bennett. But because I was the one who flagged the fraud. Careful became valuable. Cautious became leadership. My parents changed too. Not dramatically. Not with speeches. Just quieter. My father asked for my opinion before approving new projects. My mother stopped comparing. It wasn't warmth. But it was respect. And respect lasts longer than favoritism. The legal case against Bennett moved forward without me. I didn't attend every hearing. I didn't watch the headlines. Consequences don't need an audience. Maya sent one final message months later. I'm sorry. No explanation. No justification. Just 2 words. I didn't respond. Some chapters close better without dialogue. A year after the engagement party, I stood in that same ballroom. Different event. Different investors. Same polished floors. But this time, when people shook my hand, they weren't choosing between brothers. They were choosing stability. The real kind. I didn't give a dramatic speech. I just spoke about risk management. Transparency. Accountability. The unexciting things that actually build something sustainable. And when the applause came, it felt different. Not loud. Not performative. Earned. That night, I went home alone. No champagne. No celebration. Just quiet. I sat on my balcony and thought about the version of me standing in that engagement hall a year ago, smiling while everything collapsed. Back then, I thought losing everything meant I had failed. Now I understood something else. I didn't lose everything. I lost what was never secure to begin with. What I rebuilt? That was mine. Not borrowed. Not stolen. Not leveraged. Mine. And that's something no one can inherit.